I wish I could see you all. It's nice when I see faces. I'm happy to be here. We were talking with Martin for a little bit before, and he wondered, because he had just finished reading Good Chances by Howard Levin, of how we all came together. In 1967, a girl named India had met my high school friend in Haight-Ashbury. In 1967, they came to New York and stayed at my apartment because they were on their way to see the gurus and maybe smoke some hashish. I stayed. They asked me if I wanted to come, but I was meditating with Mahesh Yogi at the time, and I said no. I mean, we were 25 years old. And some of us were even younger. We didn't really know very much. In 1969, my friend Leela, came back from India, and she phoned me up and she says, "You're the last person I'm going to tell." I said, "What?" She says, "I met God in India." I said, "Yeah, sure. Tell me about it." She told me about, and by that time I was out of Mahesh Yogi. I was working. I thought I would save my money to go around the world. So here comes my old high school friend. She comes over to the apartment. She plays Dick Bach's record of From Age to Age, God Incarnates for the Protection of the Good. And my eyes just started to tear and weep. And she says to me, "I'm going to go back to India. Do you want to come?" I said, "Count me in." So now I had all this money ready to go around the world and I could go to India. But she said, "But we have to get residence visas," because I was kicked out of the country because I had no visa left. And my friend India is still there. She's roaming around with her sister Vijay and a friend we met named Howard Levin. And so we applied with a telegram to Swami. Swami had sent Lynn to learn how to meditate with a lady in New York named Hilda. So she said, "Do you want to learn how to meditate?" So I said, yes. So while we applied for our visa, we were meditating. So we wrote telegrams to Swami saying we wanted to come we couldn't get a regular visa. We couldn't get a visa. So we sent a telegram asking for permission to come to Prasanthi Nilayam. We received back 3 telegrams from Swami. Swami said, "Permission granted to Jay Mazo, Tilly Rubenstein, Michelle Malvin, come stay Prasanthi Nilayam, minimum period 6 months for spiritual solace and sadhana training. My blessings to all devotees there and the Hejmati family. Come by Shivaratri." Okay, wow. Now we've got entry visas, except Lynn couldn't get an entry visa because she had overstayed her visa and they wouldn't let her back in the country. So there's me and another person who was meditating named Jai Devi. And we prepare to go to India. We arrive in Bombay. We take trains, we take horse carts, we take buses, and we get to Prasanthi Nilayam. And there is no Ganesha gate. There's only sand. There's no Ganesha there. You can see the mandir. It's just a rectangular building, none of the round things that got added on later. We walk into that gate. Swami comes out onto the balcony. And if you're old enough, you'll remember that when they used to try to show California and New York at the same time, on the televisions, they were just dots of energy. And there was Swami, just dots of energy. I had already as soon as I knew I was going to India and started meditating, I had a dream of Shirdi Sai Baba. And in the dream, Shirdi Sai Baba covered me in vibhuti. And all I could think of from that moment on was Sai Baba and Shirdi Sai Baba. And I get there and it's miraculous. So I have, a little suitcase and some electronic equipment, and we go to find Mr. Kasturi, And Kasturi says, oh, he'll go up and tell Swami that we've come. And it's about 4 days before Shivaratri and the crowds are beginning. And Kasturi comes back out and says, Swami says, why have they come now in the middle of Shivaratri? But you'll remember the telegram said, come by Shivaratri. I think this is the part of Swami I love the most. The uncertainty, the humor, the personalness of it. So I said to Mr. Kasturi, I said, I was standing on the gents side. I didn't know there was a gents side and a ladies side. I put my suitcase down and I said, Mr. Kasturi, I'm not going outside. I'll sleep right here. So he goes back up to Swami, and Swami says, oh, give them a veranda to stay on and a room to put their equipment in. So I slept on a veranda and went to darshan. Some of the things that have happened is the way I feel that Swami teaches me. So one day I'm walking towards the ashram and I see an orange figure in the distance and my heart just gets filled with love. Turns out to be just a lady in an orange sari. But where's the lesson in that? When you see Swami in everything, your heart gets filled with joy. And I feel that through all these years, those are the ways in which Swami taught me. I'll give many examples of that. Anyway, by the third day, and I had money with me from my friend Lynn to give to India and her sister Vijay. So they show up about 4 days later or 3 days later, and I'm holding this money for them and I won't give it to them so fast. I don't want them, don't use it on drugs. You gotta wait. He says, oh, Babas, I've met many Babas. If you met India, you'll know how she is. I've met many Babas. And she'd been in India for a long time. She's a completely amazing woman. Swami calls me and Jai in on the third day. And I'm sitting in the room and Swami materializes something, a ring or a locket for someone. He throws it right past my nose to the lady next to me. And I'm thinking, no, Swami, I only want you. I only want you. And one of my mantras was that Hilda taught me is, I'm knocking on the door of your heart, Swami. I'm knocking on the door of your heart. Please let me in. And so I'm sitting in the interview room saying, no, it's only a trinket. I don't want that. I want divine enlightenment. You're 25 years old. Then he materialized something else and he threw it to someone else. And I sort of tripped out of the room. He said, come to Vrindavan after Shivaratri. Then we went to Vrindavan and you get after Shivaratri and it's a big festival and there's all kinds of people. And I didn't know where to go to the bathroom. I didn't know what to drink. People kept saying ananas, and I didn't know that's pineapple juice. Anyway, by the time I get to Whitefield, a few days after Shivaratri, I am running a high fever. I'm running a fever. And a man who was Ram Brahma comes running down the driveway and says, no, everybody should go away. Swami's only coming out on Thursdays. And if any of you who have been there, you know that feeling. What? I've come across the world and he's only coming out on Thursdays? This can't be. Anyway, so we had taken a room in Kadaguri village and we start to leave. And then Ram Brahma comes back down the driveway, says he's looking for 2 people from New York. And that became my name. Swami used to call me New York Lady. And at that time, I had no intention of being a Sai hippie. I was called into the front room with the Murfitts and Mrs. Raj Gopal and Jean, the older woman whose husband died, Walter Cowan, and I'm sitting there with these people and they're all asking very intelligent questions, I'm sure. And I'm sitting there saying, I don't know what any of this means, Swami. I don't know what any of this means. And on the third, and we're sitting in the front veranda of the old bungalow in Vrindavan. If you've probably never seen that. It was very, very plain. There was just a chair for Swami. There were ants crawling up the walls. It was very simple. Then I would go back in the evening to Kadaguri, in the afternoon to Kadaguri village. But my friend Jai Devi, he just stayed there. So when he came back and told me he's sitting there the whole day long, I said, well, I'm going to go and sit the whole day long too. So we sat when the Cowans and the Murfitts and everybody left, just me and Jai were sitting on the front veranda, and Swami would walk up to his afternoon meal or rest. And then he'd come back down and he'd say, go into tiffin. So we'd go into his, and this is brand new. I'm starving. I don't know what to eat. And we walk into the dining room and there's cold grapes and there's mango and there's papaya. And it's on silver. I thought, oh my God, it's heaven. It's really heaven. I'm in heaven. I can't tell you the joy of this. It's just unbelievable. Anyway, we stood there. We were there for many days while people came and went. And then I hear some noise coming out of the interview room. And I realized that all the other young Americans, India, Vijay, so India and Vijay write to their friend Howard. That's how Howard got there, Martin. India and Vijay write to Howard and say, oh, you've got to come down and see Sai Baba, because they were called in right before Shivaratri, and then they fell in love with Sai Baba. And these two girls had nothing. They had 2 saris and a toothbrush, and they lived under a tree with nothing. And so I'm hearing all these young people gathering, and I'm thinking, oh, Swami, I want to be in with those young people, because maybe I'll understand what we're talking about. Because the Cowans and the Murfitts, they sort of more knew about meditation and, lokas and chakras and things like that. Anyway, very quickly, everybody went back to their own homes, but the young foreigners stayed, and I was lumped in with them. And we had such a wonderful time with Swami. I mean, he'd call us in almost every day. Then he said to India and Vijay, I know you're living under a tree. You have nothing. He says, I'm going to give you a space to live in. First he gave us, there were 3 huts on the side of the Vrindavan house. They were like mud huts, just mud huts. One was a bathroom, primitive. One was a storeroom, and one was the room we cooked in. So now he also let us come and live in his house. So the ladies, we all lived in the bhajan room. It was really something. And we were sang bhajans with Swami every single night. Now I know I'm a little discombobulated. I've gotten old and I can't remember everything exactly as it was. But we're living in the back of his house. We're having bhajans with him every night. And I used to play the cymbals and I sang. And somebody told him I could sing. So he made me sing. And he had his mother come in and I sang for his mother. And when we were singing bhajans with Swami one day, the Rajmata of Jamnagar, the older Rajmata, they were also coming into the back bhajan hall in Vrindavan. And Swami asked me to sing, and I also sang English bhajans for him because I had learned things from, I forgot who it was, Yogananda songs, and door of my heart, open wide I keep for thee. I can no longer sing, by the way. Wilt thou come, precious Swami, come to me. And Swami liked that song. And you could hear him sometimes singing it as he walked through the house. Wilt thou come, wilt thou come? It was just such a joy. So this one night, I started to sing a very high-pitched bhajan. Divine Mother, my Divine Mother, Divine Swami, my Divine Mother. Swami starts to laugh. I laughed. I stopped singing and I had to start again 3 times. After I finished the song, and Swami came by afterwards and he said, no discipline. I love this about Swami. It's like your mother. Who will scold you? Who will correct you? Who will set you up? Nobody like Swami. He was so good at it. He was so wonderful at it. Then I used to play the cymbals. So I left my cymbals at the back of the mandir. And the next night I noticed that Swami was holding my talams. And I was over the moon with Swami holding my talams. Then, so every night he was asking our group for new bhajans, more bhajans, and it was hard. I mean, we didn't want to continue. We said, Swami, we want interview. We want interview. He says, oh, yes, tomorrow, go to interview room, sit there. So we sat there for hours. And then Swami comes out at 5 o'clock. He says, no time, go for bhajans. Again, this is what I love about Swami. No time, go for bhajans. That is when the song Love Is My Form was born. There was a young man there named, I forgot his name, but it wasn't Lightstorm because I taught that song to them. And he wrote it in a 3-part harmony and we sang that because Swami gave us an interview saying, love is my form, truth is my breath, bliss. Love is my form, truth is my breath, bliss is my life. No reason for love, no season for love, no birth, no death. And he took those words and he put them into that song. And that was really nice. And then the Rajmata said to Swami, Swami, why are these kids so lucky? I mean, there might have been 16 of us at the most. And Swami says they are very lucky. They do not, it's good deeds from their past lives. They do not know it now. They will only know it later. Because we so took Swami for granted. I mean, Swami then, so we're cooking in this little mud hut on the side of Vrindavan. And where do you throw the cooking water? Well, you throw it out the front door. So we have our cooking water building up a nice little puddle in the front door. So we put some stepping stones so we could walk past and get in and out of our little cooking hut. Meanwhile, Swami, in order to give darshan at that, would sometimes come around the back where we were. And he'd have to pass through our laundry. I can't tell you how appalled some people were. And then he'd come stepping over the stones into the room in which we were cooking. And he'd say, oh, chapatis. And then he took a chapati, he folded it over, braided it, and blew into it. Said, oh, I wish my memory was better. He said, pakoras. He said, you can put inside potatoes or sweets. And then he crumpled it all up. And then later on, we dragged it out from there and just ate it. So one time Swami said, are you getting milk? I will send you milk. Days go by and there's no milk. So me and India and Vijay decide, well, we have to go into the back dining room and ask Swami, where's our milk? We felt he was our mother and father and we could do and say anything. So we found, Swami came by us and we said, Swami, no milk. He says, no milk has come. He said, what can I do? Roger Eddy drank it all. But then the most wonderful thing he did is he took us into his storerooms and he opened his storeroom and he filled all of our arms with sweets and tins of food and numpkins. And the simile in that is, I will give you what you want, so someday you may want what I have to give. He filled us up. He filled our hearts. He filled everything. And to me, that was a symbol of that, of the chapatis. And God, and then one day we had rolled some chapatis. And for those Indian ladies who are out there who know how to roll chapatis, we did not. It was very hard to get them round. So we found one that looked like Swami's hair. So we drew some eyes and a nose, and we took the chapati into his dining room. And Swami says, oh, see, Swami is omnipresent in chapatis, in potatoes, everywhere. That was an amazing intimacy that we had the privilege to enjoy. And if he didn't talk to us for 2 days, we were in tears. Then Swami went to Goa. Then he went to Goa, and all the gents decided they wanted to go, Howard being the cheerleader. And I said, Howard, I want to go too. He says, no. He says, even he sent Kasturi out to tell me, no need to come. But Mrs. Nicholson, whose husband, who was the governor of Goa and whose house Swami was going to, asked me if I was coming. I didn't realize it was an invitation, so I didn't go. And there were all those days where Swami had the appendicitis. And we were alone in Vrindavan, most of the ladies. And when Swami came back, he was very angry. He said, Americans, motion, emotion, no devotion. He said, and you, he pointed at me. And I'm thinking, what did I do, Swami? What did I do? I didn't know what I did. Now, when I remember back on all of those things, it fills my heart with joy. Because again, who would be so caring but Swami about everything? I mean, I don't know that I actually did anything, but who knows what I thought. And then there was another story connected with that. So then back come the Cowans and the Murfitts and all these people, and Swami. And I used to understand and know, somehow it would always come to me where Swami was going, what Swami was doing. But that time I was very innocent. I didn't know that he was going down to the river at all. And I just didn't know. And the next day I went to Darshan perfectly happy and content. And Swami comes over and he says, where were you last night at the river? I was looking for you. Oh boy. I was like, in my head, I didn't say any of this out loud. Well, if you wanted me, why didn't you invite me? And how could that be? And the tears, and it's called bhakti. It's called devotion. And he just built it up in me. And once he said to me in Vrindavan, he said there was some, not in Vrindavan, in Puttaparthi, Gita used to bring a garland every night. And so a lot of us would sit on that darshan line, the Gita darshan line. And then there was this construction on the side of the building. He came past me and he says, do you know who's coming there? I said, no, Swami. He says, your friend, Krishna. Okay, that's pretty cool. Then he sent Vijay to teach bhajans, and he asked me to sing in the mandir. And it was hard to sing in the mandir because I couldn't pronounce everything right. And I was singing with a girl who had a lovely voice, but a very small one. So I had to carry the songs, but she only wanted songs that I found hard to sing. So we were having problems. So she sent word to Swami, she didn't want to sing. So she gave up singing. And finally, about a week later, I sent a message to Swami. Swami, I sent Kasturi to say, I don't think I can sing anymore. And Swami sent Kasturi. We were living on the top of a roof then at that time. We didn't have rooms. After the incident in Vrindavan, where he went to Goa and he got mad. We all shifted over to Puttaparthi. We didn't have rooms. We slept on the roof of Dr. Jayalakshmi's apartments and the Rajmata's apartments. And he sent Kasturi up at 10 o'clock at night. Swami sent me to tell you, he says, otherwise you would be upset all night long. Why should you stop singing now? Your voice has gotten much better. He sent me a Shruti box, which is to keep the right beat and the right pitch. And that was very cool. That was really very, very nice. The next morning, when I came down and was crossing the mandir, because, you know, Swami used to come out on the ladies' side very often. So there was the front where, you know, there were bhajans, and then we'd all run around to the back where Swami would give darshan at the back. But midday, very often Swami came out on the back balcony. And we were kind of hip to that, at least I was. And me and one or two others, we used to sit on the back wall waiting. So anyway, I was passing the back wall and Swami comes out and he says, why should you stop singing? He said the same thing he had said to Kasturi, and he threw me down grapes from the balcony. So I ate the grapes. I saved the seeds in a little packet, so for later. Then later, one boy says, oh, I have this big headache. And I said, well, I have some headache tablets back in my spot, which was at that time was in the shed. So he went and he found what he found was the grape seeds. And then he ate the 3 grape seeds. Ask me questions. It makes it easier for me because I feel like I'm rambling, and because I don't have feedback from faces, it gets harder. So if anybody out there has a question, ask me.
Michele, I can ask you a question.
Okay, Jean.
You, obviously, these were the very early years there.
Yes.
You came back to the US and then you went back again and you lived there for 10 years.
Yes.
So what inspired you to do that?
In 1973.
And what was, tell us about that.
Okay. In 1973, I had lived there from 25 to almost 29. And in 1973, he sent me back to America. And I was quite devastated. So I went back to America, and my mother, by that time, had become a devotee. We had had lovely darshans together and lots of interviews and things. My mother had become a devotee. So she wanted to go back we were going back like every 6 months. And I would go back and I'd say, Swami, can I live here now? No. And then he'd say, be careful, because I was so emotional. And then he says to me in 1976, he called me in 5 times and he said, do marriage. He says, you don't like that one. I was seeing someone. He says, you don't like that one. I will send you a good devotee. Do marriage. Marriage is a good way of life, steady way of life. Many young people coming and going in the office. Do marriage. I will perform your wedding Indian style. Do try. So I'm thinking 5 times he's telling me. And then I'm sitting on the darshan line next to a lady from California with big blonde hair named Gloria Goldstein. And I don't know her, but I'm telling her, Swami's telling me all this. So Gloria says to me, I know this great guy in California. He's a photographer. And he says, I said, fine, you do it Indian style. I'm through picking my own. I can never pick a good one. Okay, so then I have to go back to America again because I have no permission to come and live there. And I didn't hear from anybody. And I didn't know that lady very well. Then my friend Mark Schless went to India, and he was rooming with a man from California. And he starts telling that man, oh, you should know this lady in New York. She's very nice. And so he says, long distance romance, who needs it? But he takes these beautiful photographs of Swami. He sends one, he says, give one to that girl, one to the New York Center. And I was the secretary of the New York Center. And as soon as I got the photographs, I said, and the story, I knew this is the same man that lady was talking about. And I got really And I had to write a nice thank you note. And he got the thank you note on a day he was feeling blue. So he phones me up, and turns out my mother's maiden name is Kaplow. His name is Kaplowitz. Our parents are in very similar businesses. His lawyer lives next door to my first cousin, whose name is practically identical to mine, Michael Malvin and Michele Malvin. And Swami said, look for a good man doing work, good work. So everybody I asked about him says, oh, he's a wonderful man, great man, very kind, very generous. So he phones me and I tell him everything that Swami had said. And he tells me he had a dream. He says, I had a dream a year ago or 2 years ago. And I was in a room with Swami and with some other gents. And Swami asked a whole bunch of ladies all dressed in white to come in and choose their husbands. He said, in my dream, I looked at one lady and I said, pick me, pick me. And I said, great, we can exchange pictures. And if I don't look like the lady in the dream, I don't have to get married, because I wasn't keen. I thought I was going to be, I was a gopi. I wasn't keen to get married. And anyway, turns out I looked like the girl in his dream. So he flies to New York to meet me. And the first night, he doesn't like me, because now I've got short hair. I don't look like the girl in the sari in the dream anymore. I'm also a nervous wreck. And he goes back to Mark's house to sleep, and he says to himself, oh, I'm going to get out of here in the morning. This is crazy. Swami comes to him in a dream and he said, you don't go anywhere. You stay there and give it a chance, or I'll pull your ears. So Richard stays. And the next day we have dinner with my sister. And then on Sunday, we go up to Pound Ridge, where Howard happens to be living. Howard and Phil Goslin and Peggy Goslin. And we walk in the Pound Ridge Reserve. So Richard says to me, so what do we do now? Do we get married? I said, oh, I'm not getting married unless Swami performs my wedding. I said, but I'm going in July. I'll ask Swami. He says, oh, that's funny. I have tickets to go in July also. I said, oh, even funnier is my mother is coming in July. So, right. So it's sort of arranged. And then Vijay calls me up like 4 days later and says, I hear you're going to India. There's one man wants to marry me and I don't know what to do. Can I come with you to India? So Vijay and I fly to India. Richard is set to meet my mother in Bombay, Mumbai, and escort her down to Prasanthi Nilayam, where she's already been a few times. And I'm thinking, I don't know, it's 4th of July, and we're sitting on the front row, and I say, oh, Swami, Westerners need a 4th of July interview. And he says, you all go. And in we go. And there was a previous time where Swami had scolded me for sitting in the front row. So I sat at the back, but Vijay still sat at the front. He had called us monkeys and donkeys, and it was just amazing. And Vijay hands her picture to Swami and says, this man wants to do marriage. He says, yes, do marriage. Then he says, not one man, 16 men. What are you waiting for? Do marriage, do marriage. So then I hand my photo up from the back and I said, there's a proposal here, Swami. He looks at the picture. He says, yes, I know this man. He is taking pictures in Uti, a very good man. He says, how old are you now? I said, 33. He says, now you want marriage? I said, but Swami, you only told me. He says, no, sir, what do you want? Do you want marriage? Swami, I only want to do what pleases you. What do you want, sir? Do you want marriage? I said, I'm confused. He says, eh. And then I thought it was all over. I thought it was the end of it. So we leave the interview room. The next day, Richard and my mother arrive. I don't even want to talk to him, look at him or anything. I think, okay, this is over now. And my mother and I go to sit on the darshan line. We somehow get in the front row, and Richard is up on the veranda and he's carrying a bunch of photos with him framed to give to Swami. And I see Swami walk by and talk to him because I don't know what Swami has said. Then he walks down to where my mother and I are sitting, and he says, "Oh, you've come with your son-in-law." And the next day, Swami called Richard and me and my mother in, and he said to me, "What do you want? Do you want marriage?" I said, "Swami, I'm confused." He said, "Eh." He asked my mother, who I thought would say, "Whatever you want, Swami." Instead, she turned out to be really a Jewish mother. And she says, "Oh, yes, Swami, I think that would be a wonderful idea." And he called us the next day, just Richard and my mother and I, and he sets a date for the wedding. And that's how I came to come back, because Swami married us July 14th, 1977 in Vrindavan. And it was quite nice. It was quite nice. It was a double wedding with a dog. Go away. This is Dallas. Go away, Dally. Go away. Richard, call Dallas back. Can't pet you. You won't go away if I pet you. Tell me where I was at, Jean.
Well, you were telling about Swami was going to marry.
Yes, Swami was going to marry us. So, and Vijay, by that time, Wes had come, and Vijay and I are in the interview with Swami, and Swami says, "Oh, I can do engagement. I don't know Western marriage." Vijay and I say, no, Swami, you can do everything. You do everything. He says, "Okay." And he sets the whole date for the wedding. He lets everybody out of the interview room. He calls my mother and I, and he looks at me and he says, "If you want it, I will do it. If you don't want, I won't." I said, "Swami, is it a good path?" He says, "Yes, it is a good path." I said, "Then help me be a good wife." And I touched his feet. And so then I was married to Richard Kaplowitz, and I moved from New York to California. And Richard is working, and we're going back every 6 months anyway to see Swami, but he's working at his family's business, and he says he doesn't want to be there anymore. He doesn't want to work there anymore. And when I went with my first pregnancy, I didn't know I was pregnant. We were with Swami in Vrindavan. He says, "Oh, bun in the oven." He says, "Bring for naming." So we brought Sumana when she was born at 8 weeks old to Prasanthi, to Vrindavan, where he named her Sumana. First of all, he said, "What name do you want?" I said, "I don't know, Swami, you know the name." He says, no, what name do you want? So he kept pressuring me. So I said, "Saraswati." He said, "Saraswati." Too big, too big. He said, "Too many syllables." He said, "Sumana." He said, "A very good name, Sumana." So he named Sumana. And then we went back again to India. We came back with another baby. He named her Sujana. And Richard wanted out. And then by this time, he wants out of this family business. Sujana turned about 3, I think. And I said, "Okay, Richard, let's just go." He says, "I want to go live in Prasanthi." I said, "It's very hard to live in Prasanthi. It's not an easy place to live." He said, "No, that's where he wanted to go." And that's how we came back to Prasanthi that time. But we had no visa. We only had an entry visa. So here we are staying in Elsie Cowan's room with 2 small babies, and we have no visas. "Swami, we have to go back." Swami says, "There's nothing we can do." He says, "I will give you help with visas." And Richard went back that time, and he told Richard, I will give help with visas." So this is another miracle, the way Swami does things. So we think the help is coming through Indula Shah, the help is coming through Goldstein, and we're waiting, and it took us almost a year to sell our house in Oregon. And there's nothing I can do. We're sending away visas. We've sold the house. I send away to the San Francisco office for tourist visas because I don't know what else to do. Meanwhile, 3 months before that, my sister says, "Oh, I was in the elevator in New York with a man from India, and I told him how my sister lives there. And he says, 'Oh, if you ever need any help, call me.'" At that time, I said, "No, Phyllis, I don't want to mix up the help. I think we're getting help through the other sources. So finally I call her after I've already sent the paperwork off to San Francisco. She says, "You'll never guess who I ran into in the elevator again." Turned out he's the Consulate General of New York. I phone him up. And I said, I've sent away for a tourist visa in San Francisco. He says, "No problem. He's a good friend of mine." Within 2 hours, stamp, entry visa to India. Miracle? Absolutely. Absolutely. And so that's how I wound up. We wound up coming back to India with the 2 children to live for the 10 years, which also was magical. Some of the most magical things, one of the most magical things that I'm very grateful that Swami stopped talking to me. He stopped talking to me for about 18 years. It made me go inside, because Swami says, "I'm always with you, in you, around you, above you, below you." And I had to fight for that. I had to remember all the beauty of Swami. I had to, again, "I'm knocking on the door of your heart. Please let me in. Swami, I'm holding on to your lotus feet." Yeah, until I felt it more and more. And even now, it's always this battle to feel his presence and hear his voice, and to understand beyond that Swami is everywhere and in everything and in everyone, like that lady in the orange sari. And also I had an experience in Vrindavan where there was a lady who had come with a sick child. The child was blind, and the lady had the child on her lap. He was a young boy, about maybe 8 years old. And she was doing everything for the child, wiping his nose and his face. And, and it came into my mind, this lady is going to make that child deaf and dumb, not just blind. And then it came to me, oh, see, Swami is not that kind of a mother. Swami is not that kind of a mother. So when he doesn't talk to you, and he also said this in an interview, he says, sometimes Swami is talking to you. That time everybody is happy. Sometimes I don't look, I don't talk. He says, that time, better time, sir. That time you are thinking very deeply. Who am I? What is right? What is wrong? What is good? What is bad? Better time, sir. And I do believe that. I think that God is everywhere and in everything, and that the meditation and the bhakti. And for me, there was also a young man from California. I don't know if you knew him. His name was Seneca, Alexis Cunningham's son, and Alexis and Tim's son. And they came to India with Seneca, who had a cancer. And she knew that Swami wasn't going to cure him. When Seneca died at 13 years old, the last words he said to his mother is, Swami is not the key. Swami is the keyhole. To go right through Swami. And another time, when we were living at another time in Vrindavan, when it was still the early days, a couple came and they said, oh, why are you always running to be in the front and sit near Swami? He said, God is everywhere. You should go inside and meditate and find God everywhere. So I decided, okay, that sounds right to me. I should do that. So I tried sitting in the back and I wound up in tears for weeks. And finally I sat in Swami's garden and Swami came out and he said, I said, Swami, some people say God is everywhere and in everything, and one should meditate and go within and find that. I said, on the other hand, your form is so beautiful, one wants to follow it everywhere. He says, see, this is true. God is everywhere and in everything, but you can use this form as long as you have your body consciousness. When your body consciousness goes, this form will also go like a water bubble. I mean, pearls upon pearls of wisdom. That's another thing. One time, some of the older devotees, a lady named Kamala Sarti used to tell me stories about the really early days when Swami was like a teenager. And I think he was a young man in his 20s when he went to Mahabalipuram in Madras. And she said while he was walking along the shoreline, the waves came up, and when they receded, there was a ring of pearls around Swami's feet. That was a very wonderful story. I was in Mahabalipuram when Swami was in Madras, and I was sitting in an old temple close on to the beach. And all I can think of sometimes is, make me this pearl, or make me this sand under your feet. And these are meditations. The remembering is meditations. The everything and nothing is the same place. That was a very important thing to me, that everything and nothing is the same place. So sometimes, especially, I just say, just let me be the sand, let me be nobody. Let me be nothing. What else? I mean, there's a billion stories, but like I said.
You spent, during your 10 years there, Michele, I understand I believe your husband taught there. And then what did you do all day? What did you do there?
Well, various things. I built the gardens, for one, because we had 6. We had a room at the end of 6, and there was a small plot of land there. So I started to put some flowers and some other things. And then there was all this emptiness to the left of us. And one day I saw a young woman sitting crying. And I thought, oh my God, these people, they're put in sheds. They have nowhere to meditate. They have nowhere to be alone. Let me build a place where they can do that. So I started building these gardens. First, I started with the pond, right? So there was a pond right next. We built a pond right next to my room. And it was leaking. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, oh God, Swami, I really need some help. I'd love to have a little bridge. I need a carpenter and I need a mason to fix up this so it's not leaking. And this man comes walking along and he says, oh, can I help do anything? I said, well, I'm looking for a carpenter or a mason. He said, I'm a mason. And he fixed the pond. So that the pond came, and I built the gardens, but at other times, Swami had me do some other things. There were Christmas shows. The Christmas shows were big. But Swami he is tricky. He is tricky. I had the kind of a mind that sort of calculated things. I always knew how many people there were, because I knew Swami would ask how many ladies were working and how many saris and how many gents there were, because Swami liked to get out things. So he comes into the shed where we're all sort of practicing, and he asks Gail Muniz's daughter, Monique, or the other one. Anyway, she doesn't know the answer. And I'm sitting right next to her. Talk about being set up. I know the answer. I'm sitting right next to her. And I start to say how many. He says, not you, sir. But even the scoldings, even being told I was a monkey, a dog, street dogs are better, sir. It's all his grace. It's all fabulous. He doesn't talk to you. He talks to you. It doesn't matter. What matters is the quality of the bhakta. And there's a very big story about that in one of either the Ramayana or the Mahabharata. And I used to read those books, and I would carry those books, again, back to the early days, past the mandir, and Swami would say, oh, your pillow. It was very great. It was just very great to walk and talk with him. Richard taught at the university. He also did some work at the hospital with things. I mean, he gives you, Swami, it's also a hard time. It's not always easy. There was the Western Canteen, and he tried to put me and Al Drucker in charge of it. And that was like putting fire and water together. And so Swami gave it to somebody else to do. So I helped organize all the ladies at Christmas time, which was really very hard and very heartbreaking, because you couldn't get 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 Western women to walk past the front gate so the other ones at the back could get in. And it was very hard, very hard. It's not an easy place to be. And Swami wasn't always an easy teacher. But once he asked me, it was a summer course, and somebody had given a talk, and it was very dry, very boring. And Swami used to come walk amongst the chairs and the desks, and he came past, he said, how was the lecture? He said, Swami, not so good. He says, no, how was I? I said, you, Swami? You are wonderful, Swami. You are wonderful, Swami. You are wonderful. And he says other things, like one time Vijay and I were sitting in this darshan line, and we were mad at somebody, and we were talking, I guess the word is smack, about them. And Swami came by and he said to us, talking 1/2 hour before, what were you talking? We were afraid to answer. He went to Gita, he came back, he says, see, talk about Swamiji, talk about spiritual things. He says, but don't talk bad about others. I hear every word everyone says everywhere. Lots of pearls, lots of teachings, lots of wisdom. One girl came, she wanted to go back to America. She didn't have the money or anything to go back. And another girl came and she wanted to stay. So they decided they would switch tickets and passports. And she could go and the other one could stay. And I thought this was a pretty bad idea. I said, Swami. So when he came by, I said, Swami, she wants to use this other ticket. He said, no, sir, it's not good. He says, what do you need? She said she needed money for a ticket. He says, I will send you the money. He opened right to the passport picture and he said, this is not you. This is not good. He says, what do you need? And he sent her the money for the ticket home. He once asked me also, I was waiting for money from my father to come. And I said, Swami, I'm waiting for this money. And Baba was going to Puda party. And I said, I'm waiting for this money. Should I wait here? He says, money? He says, how much money do you need? I said, no, Swami, I'm waiting. He says, no, I'm sending tomorrow. I am the bank. The next day I received $300 in cash. And Swami comes out and he says, I'm a poor man. This is what I love the most about Swami. The humor, the inconsistency, the who am I, and it was, it was living there, I had to send my kids to the school, and that was very, very hard. That's when he stopped talking to us. So if I don't speak as much about that era, it's because it was harder in its way. But then there was the growth that comes from Swami not talking to you. And that was a wonderful growth. And coming back. And then, eventually Richard said, I think it's time for us to go back. And his mother's husband had just died, and he felt he needed to go back and help his brother. So we came back to the States. It wasn't easy. What else? Is there anybody else in that audience who has a question?
Yes, if anyone would like to ask a question, now would be a good time. So unmute yourself and ask Michele a question.
I remember, Michele, when you lived across from the canteen in Prasanthi Nilayam, and I visited you and your husband in LA. It's Jack out of the box.
I knew it was you, Jack. I could see.
Love and blessings, Sai Ram, dear.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Yeah, go Paul, go for
it. Sai Ram, I hearing your experience and spending so much time so close to interacting with God. I'm emotional listening to your stories, and I don't understand how people live on such a normal life after having so closeness to God in person, interacting with him on a daily basis. How I only saw him three times, and I know the impact that had on my life and how it changed me. I know it's life is journey, there's a lot to learn, but I still very fascinated. I still don't get it. I see so many people come, speakers come and talk so casually. I'm not saying experience is divine. It is divine. But I personally like listening to a story, feel like someone is so close to God and interacted on daily life and lived 10 years so close to him. How do you take that in? How do you live with that? How do you like, that's
it's not easy.
Handle.
It's not easy. I used to think, how can I sit and meditate and feel so close to Swami, and then I have to come back to this body and be an imperfect human being? But this is the loka, this is the place where you come to do your duty, to do your life. And this is your journey. And you don't have an out. You have to accept your humanness as well. If you've ever read any Ramakrishna cried to the Divine Mother. She said, you have to keep this much ego in order to be here. So it's like that. I mean, what choice do you have except you call on him as often as you can. You say, forgive me for being, for any of the mistakes that I made, to help me to be a better person. You struggle with the connection. You remember the impact of Swami. That is the meditation. And Swami said, Richard asked Swami, when will we get that for which we came here for? And Swami said, coming soon in this lifetime, slowly understanding. And one time in the early days, one boy, we named him Freedom. He used to yell at everybody. I hear he's now a rabbi in Israel and he still yells at everybody. But oh God, I lost my train of thought. Oh yes, so Freedom asks Swami every day, what should we eat? When will we get liberation? He says, I could give it like this. He points sort of like, he says, but it wouldn't be worth it. He says, we are all one. Your journey is my journey. Your enlightenment will be my enlightenment. I think that we're here, we're bumping into our brothers and sisters and our friends and our family with love and kindness. And this is an important thing that you do, to stay close to Swami in your heart and keep that love and spread it. He came to earth for us. And he did that. When you see him walk in Prasanthi Nilayam in the heat and everybody clamoring to touch his feet. And yet Swami comes out 2-3 times a day like this. He came, he did the journey. I think we have to do our journey with love. And that's what I think.
My thing, I having his darshan 4 times, to me, it was just like life-changing experience, just to seeing him as a dot on the stage or walking around. And here I hear so many, you guys very blessed that got to know him so up close and personal. It just,
now we know.
It just bonded me. It's just so hard to take that and like, wow, how did they do it? I mean, just seeing him, I remember every time I see Swami, I am in tears. I can stop. It's just like all the energy coming out. It just,
I know.
So
I sat behind Swami on an airplane. Wow. And sitting behind him on the airplane, I see a small inchworm in his hair. So I whispered to the lady next to me, there's a worm in his hair. And Swami says, what? And I said, Swami, there's a worm in your hair. He says, take it. I could not bring my hands to go into that hair. It was like, what would happen to me? I would burn up. Well, I'll see. What would become of me? I'd fall into the forest. I would see universes that I can't do this one. I could not get my hand to reach into his hair. So he turns to Gokak, and Gokak fumbles for quite a bit of time in his head to take the worm out. But yes, he's overwhelming. Sometimes you could just look at him and think, I'm going to burn up in this fire. But somehow he keeps us still on this loka. And this is my only explanation, is to be here to spread the love, to cultivate that love in your heart. And then when you see your friends, when you see your loved ones, when you see even strangers, they feel it. A young man who has been in our orbit since my daughter was a teenager, and she's now 40, he's heard a lot about Sai Baba, but he doesn't know how he feels. He did some meditation, but last night, night before last, he called up Richard last night. He says the night before, he had a dream where Sai Baba came to him in the dream. He says he was like right there. And he said, but Sai Baba, I don't know if I even like you. I don't know much about you. I don't know if I like you. Swami stood up and hugged him in the dream. Like that, you don't know who you're affecting. You don't know what it's about.
I had the same dream. I had this exact same. I told Swami, I don't like you. I don't like the way you look. I'm very intimidated. I don't feel comfortable. He came and my dream told me, I love you very much. And he gave me a hug.
And now you have to live with it. I mean, he's very powerful. I mean, he's like the fire, Shiva. He's, can you live with it? Can you bear the, stories about Kundalini yogi, and people feeling this fire. You've been in the fire. And he says, you are my bangaru, you are my gold. I will put you in the fire. I will pound you. I will melt you. I will turn you into a gem. So there, you're in the fire now.
Wow.
You have to live with it.
It's so powerful to hear you talk about Swami. Wow.
Now we are moving along. Now, would anybody else have a question?
Yeah, Sairam, I have a quick question. So, Michele, thank you for your wonderful sharing. Quick question for you. You mentioned that Swami did not speak to you for 18 years. What did he say to you after those 18, at the end of those 18 years?
Well, that was an interesting thing, because he wasn't talking to me, and we were going to leave Prasanthi Nilayam. So, of course, I was close with the Indian ladies in India. They were very kind to me, mostly. And so Mrs., I forgot her name. I mean, I know her name, but it's just not coming. She said, no, you sit here in the front row and you ask Swami. Tell Swami you're leaving. He ignored me. Again, she put me there. I had planned to say it in Telugu. So I lean up, Swami comes right over to me. This is after so long of not talking to me. And I say, Sayankalamu Potanu, Swami, something like that. In the evening I am going, or tomorrow I am going. And he says, and he knew I was never coming back. I didn't know I was never coming back. I thought I was going for the summer holiday. And suddenly he comes over, he gives me Padnamaskar. He says, come in the evening with your daughter. In the evening, he makes us vibhuti, because he knew I wasn't coming back to ever live again there. And the last words he said to me in an interview was, he put his finger on my nose and he says, you think whatever happens, it is good for me, it is good for me. And that was very important too. You think whatever happens, it is good for me, it is good for me. And then the last time I was in Vrindavan, he ignored me completely, but my head, my heart went into a space where everything was perfect. And I was laughing, and he did that in two ways. There was a young woman there, well, she wasn't young anymore, I guess, but Swami used to go to her house for tea, and she was always getting interviews, and then he stopped talking to her and she was always in tears. And then I see that she's happy again, and now Swami's going to her house again. And it hit me. And then I'm sitting like the 10th row back in the middle, which is a pretty good seat. And everybody pushes. for this much space. And I'm laughing. My head just went into this laughter of what does close to Swami mean? And it just, and I knew everything was exactly perfect the way it was. If I could get that epiphany and that moment back, I would, because everything was exactly as it's meant to be and perfect, even the hard times. So those were my closing moments in person with Swami.
Very nice. Thank you, Sarah.
Now, Michelle, Priti has asked us to, she just texted me and said, you know, we're enjoying this. This is so valuable to have you tell us these stories that we skip the bhajan and we can talk a little more here. We can have bhajans anytime, but to have you here with us is just so wonderful. So I have a question, and maybe somebody else has a question first. Does anybody else have a question here? Just unmute yourself and you can ask Michelle a question. Anyone else? Well, I have a question. Obviously, you being so close to Swami for so many years, what did it do to you when Swami passed? How did that affect you?
I had already internalized Swami so much, because when he doesn't talk to you and you can't, and I never wanted to see him in that wheelchair. So I never went back to see him in that condition, even though so many people told me that it didn't mean anything. I had already internalized Swami so much, but I always feel sad that I couldn't go back, that I couldn't now. So now again, it's the same thing. It's just the struggle to see him internally. And he'll say, once I went back to Swami and I said, I was married to Richard, and there was this photograph that was always on the television. And sometimes I would feel very close to that, still have that photo. And I went to Swami and I said, Swami, I just miss you so much. He says, why? Aren't I always talking to you through that picture? So, I mean, I don't feel that I'm separate from Swami or that Swami is not here. I just have to work a little harder sometimes to quiet down enough to hear his voice. Because to me, still, he is the keyhole. I go straight to bliss when I think about, when I hear his voice or I see him smiling from the picture. And sometimes it's overwhelming, like the fire. It's just like, how can I keep looking at this picture now? I'm going to burn up if I keep looking. And it's, you have to understand he is everywhere and in everything. I'm in you, around you, above you, below you. I am always with you. Be good, see good, do good. I mean, all those things Swami said, you just have to hold on to them and believe and know. Walking in the light of God, be still and know. Truth and bliss forever, as on my way I go. Radiating harmony, be still and know. And he's our gift. He came for us. And, sometimes it's a struggle. And sometimes I get angry and mean. And I don't like myself for it. But so once there was another time I asked Swami, I said, Swami, why do I have to have so much jealousy? He says, no, Bangaru, not jealousy. Too much love for Swamiji. He said, no, Swami, I have so much anger. He said, not anger. He says, just body weakness. You are good. Don't worry. So sometimes I was a monkey and a donkey, and street dogs were better. But sometimes it was the opposite. So, we're lucky. We are very lucky. And that's that.
A wonderful talk. And a wonderful treat to have you with us here, Michelle, to hear these wonderful stories.
Definitely.
And we will, any announcements that will be coming to you will be coming on through the your email notices. And Michele, we will make a recording of this and put it on the internet with your permission.
Okay.
And we maybe you could join us again someday. And we have this really, really very, very valuable talk. And thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me, everybody. I enjoyed it. It makes me happy.
Thank you.
Sai Ram.
Sai Ram.
Sai Ram. Sai Ram. Sai Ram.